Nico, it's Roman. Let's go bowling.
Grand Theft Auto 4. In a franchise filled with larger-than-life action and a glorification of crime that would make even Martin Scorsese proud, Grand Theft Auto 4 stands alone as the middle child that wanted to do things their own way.
You are the middle child, aren't you?
Middle child.
Instead of a homegrown boy willing to risk it all and break a couple laws in the search for a better life, we get a trauma-riddled foreigner leaving his home country, desperately hoping to one day leave his life of war crimes behind. Instead of over-the-top set pieces and missions, we get action that's grittier and more grounded. Instead of flashy outfits and cars, we get winter coats and sedans. But is that what makes Grand Theft Auto 4 so beloved nearly 20 years later? Is it its realistic story, grounded missions, and relatable aesthetic that makes the game so memorable? Maybe, but I believe what makes it so special and what makes it so memorable is how well it utilized downtime. For the uninitiated, allow me to grant you a glimpse into the experience of Grand Theft Auto 4. In GTA 4, you play as a veteran of the Yugoslavian Wars, Nico Bellic. It's important to note that the Yugoslavian Wars are defined by the massive amounts of war crimes committed by just about everyone. We never find out on which side Nico fought, but the main takeaway is that he was both a perpetrator and victim of numerous war crimes, leaving him riddled with PTSD by the time the game begins.
You remember, during the war, we did some bad things, and bad things happened to us. War is where the young and stupid are tricked by the old and bitter into killing each other.
So in GTA 4, you play as a cynical, depressed, and pragmatic guy looking for a better life in America, an idea he's heard loads about from his cousin Roman. When he gets to the US, Nico learns that the American dream is more of an idea than a real thing. He sees that, in reality, the dream Roman promised was more of a nightmare, littered with mobsters, loan sharks, and near-death experiences. Fresh off the boat, Nico finds himself in firefight after firefight just so that he can make it by. As a result, the gameplay loop in GTA 4 is essentially as follows. Drive to a mission, which is super fun because the physics are sweet. Shoot some people, repeat. It's simple, and it would undoubtedly get repetitive if it weren't for the times that Nico's cousin Roman calls him up to invite him to participate in one of the many side activities throughout Liberty City.
Nico, it's Roman. Let's go bowling.
Though he may have gotten annoying at times, a phone call from your cousin Roman told you that it was time to relax, take a break, bask in the world that Rockstar worked so hard to create. When you took a break from mowing down the Russian mob to play a game of darts with Roman, it gave you a glimpse into a different part of Nico and to a different part of Liberty City. When you took Nico out drinking with one of his friends, little Jacob, it allowed him to forget about his dangerous life for just a bit. When you strolled into an internet cafe and logged on to lovemeat.net, it gave you a feeling of hope for Nico, that one day he might get the happy, quiet life that he so desperately wants. These situations, this downtime, gave you and Nico a pocket of quiet in which Nico could be free from the lingering feeling that life would never get better for him, only worse and worse until his inevitable death. That got dark, but let me ask you a question. What separates a good action-adventure game from a great action-adventure game? What keeps something like Assassin's Creed Shadows from becoming a Ghost of Yote? You could say it's the combat or the mission structure, but if that were the case, then Rockstar games would have been hated years ago. You could say it's the map, but if that were the case, then Ubisoft would probably be the single best developer ever. You could say it's the story even, but if that were the case, then Mafia 3 would probably be a top 5 game ever created. Story, setting, action, these are all huge factors in making an action-adventure game great, but I believe that what sets one game apart from the other is how it utilizes downtime. For the purposes of this video, we'll define downtime as content that allows the player to engage with the game world in an action-free way that most players would find meaningless towards progression. The main motivation driving the player to engage with this content is just to want to engage with the game world, plain and simple. Some examples would be bowling in Grand Theft Auto 4, hanging out with confidants in Persona 5, or building your own island in Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. Action-adventure, it's a broad category, and it could include games as linear as Uncharted or as open as Skyrim. Nonetheless, from Tomb Raider to Fallout, every action-adventure game needs a bit of downtime. Nonstop action is great and can make for some damn good fun, but the longer that action goes on without any break, the quicker your suspension of disbelief starts to dissipate, because your character feels a bit less relatable, due in large part to just how long games are these days. That's also the reason why, when a game does go on forever without any downtime, the game starts to blend together. Downtime stops the fun from ever becoming monotonous. It gives space for the player, for the character to breathe. It's in this space that side characters turn from forgettable faces to friends that the player carries with them throughout their entire journey. It's where the player can care for and learn about the character whose life they've risked hundreds of times and whose life they'll risk 100 times more. It's a time that allows the player to connect to the world they spent the last dozens of hours exploring, finding things within it that they enjoy and want to visit. And perhaps most importantly, it's during this downtime where the player can reflect on their journey so far, the decisions they took, and how they could better prepare for the journey ahead, bringing a great sense of mindfulness to a journey that could so easily become mindless. This isn't even exclusive to video games. The idea that action is made better by downtime is prevalent in all forms of literature, be it books, film, or TV. A great example of this would be Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 2. Now, I hear you. Season 8 of Game of Thrones was an absolute mess. Years have passed, and yet the wound still feels fresh. If the show's ending hurt you as much as it hurt me, then it's easy to discount every episode from Game of Thrones' 8th season as episodes completely unworthy of your time. For just 1 second though, I'd like you to forget about everything you currently know about that absolute dog shit of an ending. Going into Season 8, Episode 2, we knew that the White Walker threat was imminent. This was especially unnerving because at this time, we still believed that any character in the show could die, aside from Jon Snow, of course. The feeling going into Episode 2 was ominous and foreboding. It gave us one of the only situations in which most of the main characters were in the same place at the same time. A reunion that would, in any other scenario, be magnificent to witness. But it wasn't magnificent. It was harrowing. It was somber. It was a melancholy feeling that in just 1 week, we would watch a handful of our favorite characters meet their end. And for this one episode, for this one night, the characters put their scheming aside. The action took a pause. For one night, we got to see characters interact with one another in a way that we never saw before, where everyone acted as friends before meeting the hangman in the morning. Of course, as we know now, this didn't pay off because in the next episode, basically everyone survived, undermining that signature feeling of gravitas that Game of Thrones is known for. But on the night that Season 8 Episode 2 aired, we had no idea what would come next. For that moment, for that short moment, we were given one of the best depictions of downtime ever shown off in media. People are often confused as to how this episode is so frequently listed as one of the best of all time, and it's due to everything I just said. The feeling this episode brought with it when you had no knowledge of what came after. This downtime acted as a moment of reminiscence, togetherness, and almost as a farewell to these characters we had grown to love over the last decade. As a result, we're left with a shining example as to how downtime can be used to make action better. And this principle can, and should, extend to all action games as well. To really understand the importance of downtime in video games, let's swing on over and take a look at how a handful of games handle downtime, and how its inclusion or exclusion impacted them. Oh, Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is a great game. Mechanically, it's better in nearly every way than Spider-Man and Miles Morales before it. The swinging is faster, and the additions of the web wings make flying through New York more fun than ever, a feat I wasn't sure was possible after the first Spider-Man. That's especially great because the map is 40% bigger, giving you much more room to put those traversal powers to the test. Then, to top it all off, the combat is punchier, and while I do miss some perks from the first game, the addition of the black suit more than makes up for them. The issue with Spider-Man 2 is that it's lacking content-wise. Story, side content, and yeah, downtime. The narrative as a whole feels rushed, and as a consequence, we get a sequel that doesn't exactly feel like a full sequel. The jump feels closer to Spider-Man and Spider-Man Miles Morales than the jump between God of War and God of War Ragnarok. The point I'm trying to make is that while Spider-Man 2 is a great game, most of us can agree that it is lacking in certain aspects.
When you help someone, you help everyone.
While it's certainly not the cause of all of Spider-Man 2's flaws, the lack of downtime is a big contributor to everything feeling rushed. There really isn't much side content at all in Spider-Man 2, and the little side content that is there would hardly qualify as downtime. If you're trying to find something to do outside of the main story, your options are beat up a bunch of bad guys or participate in one of two downtime activities. These two side activities don't really qualify as downtime, especially because you need to do them to get different upgrade currencies, reducing the amount of agency the player has in choosing to engage with them. Even still, they're the closest the game has to downtime, so we gotta talk about them. One of these two activities is to help the Emily May Foundation complete some experiments around the city. The missions are endearing, sure, but they don't really flesh anything out or offer much in terms of gameplay. They do a great job at breaking up the action, but they ultimately feel a bit meaningless in the end. The most it offers is a peek into the handful of ways that the Emily May Foundation is bettering the world. Like I said, super endearing, but it also feels kind of shallow. This was a perfect opportunity to explore the memories Peter has of his Aunt May, or to further flesh out how Harry and Peter's relationship had changed over the years, or maybe even how citizens of New York are feeling and reacting to the prospects of the Emily May Foundation. But the experiment missions never dare to go that far. Instead, you're just riding a bike through a park, or flying bee drones around a park, or flying around a park deploying drones, all while Peter makes the occasional quip. Not to mention, this is Peter literally working his job, so this downtime isn't even downtime, it's just the closest this game has to offer. The other activity is better in some ways, but way worse in others. From a gameplay perspective, the unidentified target site activity is far less inspired than the EMF experiments. Instead of having slightly different gameplay with each occasion, the unidentified target activity just has you chasing after drones throughout the city. We already spend most of the game swinging and gliding, so the gameplay isn't exactly engaging, nor does it feel like a break from the action. The one positive point here is that when you do track down each drone, you find some information on Kraven, which fleshes him out a bit. I feel like this activity would have been much better if it had Peter doing some sort of investigation outside of his costume, with the help of Mary Jane, that ultimately led to the same information about Kraven. Along the way, Peter and MJ could explore their relationship a bit more, and maybe even have a date or two, fleshing both of their characters out, while working to ultimately flesh Kraven's character out. This would have been a more thorough character exploration while serving as a great way to break up the action. While I absolutely love Spider-Man 2 as a whole, I can't help but feel as if it would have been immeasurably better had it taken some time to flesh out the story and setting in the side activities. Even the one side activity where they did flesh out a character, Yuri, it felt identical to the main story, and as a result, kind of blended together with it. If the EMF experiments or the drone chasing activities were fleshed out or replaced entirely with something more thoughtful, they would have served as a great way to tie the entire experience together more. I mean, just look at the carnival mission. It's one of the most memorable missions in the game, and the overall lack of downtime is why the mission is so memorable. It's the one mission that feels truly unique in a game that otherwise kind of blends together. Ironically, the carnival tries to emulate downtime without ever actually providing it. You're still in a main quest, you didn't choose to do this mission, and because the mission is required, there's nothing you can discover here that you wouldn't have discovered had you missed it in another playthrough. Compare this to something like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and the difference is night and day. Now, I hear you. I've touched on this game quite a bit in my last two videos. Go watch those if you haven't yet, they're amazing. And I plan to dedicate my next video entirely to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, so I won't spend too much time harping on it here. That being said, it does serve as an amazing contrast to Spider-Man 2 and how much downtime can impact a game. Where Spider-Man 2 doesn't seem to think that downtime matters at all, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 seems to think that downtime is just as important as its main story. There are so many examples of great downtime in this game that I don't even know where to begin. First and foremost, you have to know that everything you do in this game, from picking flowers to slaying enemies, has a skill associated with it, and by participating in said skill, you raise said skill. So let's say you're on your way to a mission and you get distracted by a flower bed, so you decide to spend a couple minutes picking out a pretty bouquet for your lover. That time you spend picking flowers will also be time spent raising your survival skill, thus fleshing out who Henry is as a character. But honestly, that's the smallest example I could provide. A bigger and much better example would be the side quest line containing the quest A Good Scrub. This quest line sees you befriending a local bathhouse owner, Betty. Betty enlists Henry to help get her bathhouse up and running. The questline has you picking up women to work at the bathhouse, setting up the bathhouse, navigating licensure in the city of Kuttenberg, and even playing a hand in local politics to earn Betty's bathhouse citywide recognition. This questline is a perfect example of downtime. There's no combat, it's not a part of the main quest, and it's entirely missable. The best part, though, is how insightful this questline is. Up until this time, Henry had likely spent plenty of hours at bathhouses across Bohemia, but it wasn't until he helped Betty that Henry and the player learned the inner workings of bathhouses and how they're perceived across the region. While this is a great example, it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of ways that Warhorse Studios expertly utilized downtime to flesh out and break apart Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. If Spider-Man 2 had leaned into its downtime the way that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 had, it would have made the story feel less rushed, and it would have broken up the gameplay enough so that more missions had a greater impact. But this issue isn't exclusive to Spidey. Just like Spider-Man 2, Elden Ring also forgoes downtime almost entirely. However, where Elden Ring differs from Spider-Man is that Elden Ring doesn't blend together at all. Elden Ring's levels and enemies are so spectacular and are packed so full of varied personality that one moment of gameplay never feels like the last. Time spent in crumbling Farum Azula feels almost like an entirely different game than time spent in Caelid or time spent in Limgrave. From Software did an amazing job at ensuring that Elden Ring always felt fresh, regardless of how many hundreds of hours you may have sunken into it, which is especially impressive considering that the only thing you're doing in this game is beating people up. If you take the visuals out of it and you look only at the gameplay, then the only variety offered in Elden Ring is build variety. That's it. You can change how your character plays in combat, but it doesn't change the fact that your entire time playing the game is time spent either fighting or walking to a fight. Kinda like how I said Grand Theft Auto 4 would only be driving and shooting if not for the side content. Yet, despite gameplay that should feel repetitive, Elden Ring manages to never feel repetitive because of just how good the combat is and just how much better FromSoft is at designing varied levels and enemies than they are at creating engaging combat. Truthfully, I don't think the gameplay aspect would be made that much better or worse by the inclusion of downtime. From a gameplay perspective, it's really not needed. The narrative experience, on the other hand, would be night and day better with the inclusion of just a bit of downtime. Now, you might not know this, but Elden Ring has some amazing lore to it. The lands, the characters, everything has a rich and deep history behind it, rooted in rumor and myth. Everyone has a different understanding of the events that took place throughout the history of the Lands Between, bringing the sense of mystery and discovery to every piece of Elden Ring's lore. The issue with Elden Ring's lore is that the vast majority of it is hidden within the descriptions of in-game items. I gotta tell you, that is an absolutely crazy way to give information to the player. I get that FromSoft wants the player to intake lore at random, piece by piece, so that they can form their own understanding, but doing so within the text of item descriptions is needlessly obtuse, convoluted, and most of all, the absolute most boring way possible to give information to the player. So what if, instead of hiding the lore within the description of random items, FromSoft were to create taverns, one tavern for each region of the Lands Between. Each of them would have a rotating cast of a few dozen NPCs that knew some form of lore about their region or the characters within it. They could repurpose the same text from the item descriptions for dialogue instead. And if they wanted to save on time and money, they wouldn't even have to voice the NPCs. They could just use text boxes. The tavern could also contain a bed for the player to sleep in that really just acts as a site of grace. The same menu would pop up as a site of grace when you use the bed, but instead of sitting by a campfire, the character would be seated on the edge of a bed next to a fireplace. When you decide to leave the menu, a quick animation plays where the character lays down and the screen fades to black. There can also be an option to buy a drink at the bar where doing so plays an immersive animation and gives the player some sort of 30-minute buff. The hardest part of implementing this would be the level and character design, but considering just how amazing FromSoft is at these two things specifically, it would pay off greatly in the end and provide some incredibly memorable locations of respite. With one non-invasive addition of downtime, Elden Ring would have had a place that provides the player with a short immersive bit of gameplay, a digestible way to intake lore, and a contextualization of the citizens of the Lands Between, all without sacrificing the reasons they chose to attach lore to item descriptions in the first place. Despite how amazing Elden Ring is, it's also very controversial, and that's due partly to the way the narrative is currently structured. To most players, the narrative doesn't even exist. I mean, why would they think to check an item's description to understand a game's narrative? There are many gamers who rely on a narrative experience to get them through a game, and I truly think that most of those gamers would be into the idea of receiving a narrative in a randomized order. It's just the way that FromSoft went about it that was a turnoff to way too many, if those people even knew where to look. By utilizing Downtime to deliver the narrative, FromSoft would have still maintained a sense of piecing the narrative together and would have still allowed the player to ingest as much or as little story as they want. It's really interesting to compare this to, say, Ghost of Yote, because these two games are deceivingly similar in their game design. They both applied a sense of freedom in the vein of Breath of the Wild, but where Elden Ring applied that freedom to a linear action game, Ghost of Yote applied that freedom to an already open world action game. Funny enough, they ended up in pretty similar places. They're both open world action games that allow you to tackle things in whatever order you want, but I'd say that Ghost of Yote delivers a more complete experience than Elden Ring, and that's due to how well Yote uses Downtime. Ghost of Yote is a revenge story taking place in feudal Japan. You play as Atsu, a woman whose family was murdered by a gang known as the Yote Six. At the beginning of the game, that's basically all you know, that the Yote Six killed your family and you want revenge. You don't know who they are, where they are, nothing. It's all on you, the player, to explore and find leads that get you closer and closer to your goal. The way the game goes about this is pretty damn brilliant, especially in the beginning of the game. It gives you feelings similar to when you first saw Limgrave in Elden Ring. You had a land before you brimming with things to find, and it's just up to you to explore and find them. As you do, you uncover people to duel, people to save, and people with information on the Yote Six. The inclusion of NPCs and cutscenes make it so that, if you were to take Downtime out of the game altogether, Ghost of Yote would still be a pretty good game. For like 90% of the people, the game could get by on its main story, level design, and combat variety, and still rival Elden Ring in terms of quality. But that's what's so amazing. Ghost of Yote does have Downtime. Not only that, but Downtime is a core part of the game's open world exploration. Before we dive deep into the game's Downtime, you have to know that the Yote Six own practically all of Yote, meaning that the entire time Atsu is hunting down the Yote Six, they are hunting her right back. She's in a constant fight for her life, a life whose only purpose is to kill the Yote Six, at least if you ask Atsu. Needless to say, she lives a pretty dark and dreary life. That's where the Downtime comes in. I believe, similar to Jin Sakai's life in Ghost of Tsushima, Atsu's life in Ghost of Yote is meant to represent a dramatic version of our everyday lives, and the Downtime is supposed to highlight how mindfulness can help us through even our toughest of times. I believe Sucker Punch is using Ghost of Yote as an allegory for our own struggles with mental health and how we can use mindfulness and connection to better deal with the struggles of our everyday lives. That allegory hinges on Sucker Punch's utilization of Downtime. The two best examples to highlight this theme are the hot springs and the paintings. Similar to Ghost of Tsushima, in Ghost of Yote there are hot springs all across the map. They are completely optional, but doing so gives Atsu a little health boost. Each time Atsu sets foot in one of the hot springs, she chooses something to meditate on, offering insight into Atsu or one of the other characters in the game. These moments also help show the player how they too can find a moment of calm even amidst the most chaotic times with a short meditative bath or shower. Similarly, the paintings can also bring with them a sense of calm within the overarching storm. Spread throughout Yote are mats that Atsu can use to sit and paint a picture of the surroundings before her, with your help of course. Using the touchpad, you create the general shapes of the land before you, watching them form, brushstroke by brushstroke on Atsu's page. This moment of calm and quiet gently forces the player to consider the game world around them and ground themselves in the moment. By using grounding exercises in real life, such as taking 1 second to note the things around you, you can help manage your anxiety and promote emotional regulation. So in getting the player to engage with the game world, Ghost of Yote also gently taught the player a technique they can use to ground themselves in the real world. Pretty damn cool if I say so. In relying heavily on Downtime, Sucker Punch not only drove home the overarching theme of mindfulness in the face of struggle, but they also used this time to have the player engage meaningfully in the game world. It's hard to argue that this game, that didn't even need Downtime to be great, wasn't made immeasurably better by its emphasis on Downtime. It makes you wonder just how much better Elden Ring would be if it had just one small element of Downtime, such as in the proposed tavern. At the end of the day, action games depend primarily on how good the action is. You were drawn to Spider-Man for the web swinging and the combat. You were drawn to Grand Theft Auto for the chaos and maybe the cars. You were drawn to Elden Ring because of how awesome it sounds to wield FromSoft's brand of hard-hitting combat in a Zelda-like open world. Even in the cases of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or Ghost of Yote, those games wouldn't be nearly as impressive if they didn't have engaging action. But most times, focusing too much on action comes at the cost of something else, resulting in a gaming experience that doesn't feel as complete as it could. Balancing action with downtime gives space for the story to be fleshed out, to teach lessons to the player, to dive deep on characters, or to just let the player relax for a bit. And in some cases, that downtime can help make the action more impactful and more memorable. How each game goes about it can vary wildly from one to the next, but one thing is for certain, downtime makes gaming better. As action games evolve, I hope that so too does downtime. I hope that more developers take time to examine how they can use downtime to better contextualize the world and the action within it. Downtime doesn't always have to be as drastic as it is in a game like KCD 2, but it shouldn't be as light as it is in a game like Spider-Man 2 either. Each new game brings with it a new opportunity to explore downtime and create new meaningful side activities that shape the industry as a whole. Leveraging downtime in action games is just one way that video games can better cement themselves as a premier form of literature. At the very least, I hope that you, too, see the importance of downtime in video games and take a moment to engage with these expertly crafted, meaningful, quiet moments in games that are otherwise chaotic. Really quick, I just want to take a second to let you know that while I love performing analysis on games and examining how they could be better, I'm afraid that this, along with my last two videos, may be getting too negative, and I don't want to be known for picking apart video games. I love video games, so I'm going to keep it a bit positive. I'm going to spend the next however many videos writing essays about games that I love, starting with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. You can expect that out in around 2 to 3 weeks. Make sure that you're subscribed and hit that bell so that you never miss an upload. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'm desperately trying to quit my day job and pursue content creation full time, and when I can do that, I can make more high quality videos for you more frequently. Content like mine wouldn't be possible without viewers like you. Thank you so much. I love you.